What happens when Hollywood's most beloved secret agent completely loses his cool on live television? You won't believe what unfolds when Daniel Craig sits down with Lauren Laverne and transforms from charming A-lister into an explosive force of pure hostility. This isn't just another celebrity meltdown. This is a masterclass in how a simple question can detonate into television gold, leaving viewers stunned and the host fighting to maintain control of her own show. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when one of Britain's most respected broadcasters goes head-to-head with James Bond himself, in what can only be described as a career-defining moment of live television chaos. The atmosphere in the studio last night was electric from the moment Daniel Craig walked onto the set. What started as what should have been a straightforward promotional appearance quickly descended into one of the most uncomfortable and explosive confrontations ever captured on live television. Lauren Laverne, known for her composed interviewing style and ability to handle even the most difficult guests, found herself facing off against a version of Daniel Craig that nobody saw coming. Aggressive, dismissive, and displaying attitudes that left viewers absolutely shocked. The tension began almost immediately when Laverne opened with what seemed like an innocent enough question about Craig's upcoming projects and his thoughts on the evolution of action cinema. But something in Craig's demeanor shifted the moment she mentioned the changing landscape of Hollywood and the increased focus on diversity and representation in major film franchises. "Well, Lauren, let me tell you something about this industry," Craig interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that immediately put the entire studio on alert. "I've been doing this for decades, and frankly, I'm getting tired of people like you trying to tell me what's wrong with the films I've made and the characters I've portrayed." Laverne, maintaining her professional composure despite the unexpected hostility, attempted to clarify her question. "Daniel, I wasn't suggesting anything was wrong with your work. I was simply asking about your perspective on how the industry has evolved." But Craig wasn't having any of it. His body language became increasingly aggressive as he leaned forward in his chair, his famous blue eyes now cold and calculating. "No. Don't try to backtrack now. You and all these other female journalists, you're all the same. Always trying to create controversy where none exists. Always trying to make everything about your little social justice campaigns." The studio audience fell into an uncomfortable silence as Craig's words hung in the air. Laverne, to her credit, didn't back down. "Daniel, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of my question entirely. I'm not trying to create controversy. I'm simply trying to have a conversation about your career and your thoughts on the industry you've been part of for so long." This is where things took a truly ugly turn. Craig's laugh was harsh and condescending as he shook his head dismissively. "Your thoughts, your conversation, it's all the same feminist agenda wrapped up in different packages. You women in media think you know better than the people who've actually been out there making these films, taking the risks, doing the real work." The sexist undertones were now impossible to ignore, and Laverne's professional mask began to show cracks of genuine disbelief. "I'm sorry, but I need to stop you right there, Daniel. What exactly are you suggesting about women in media and their capabilities?" Craig's response was even more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. "I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, some of you should stick to what you actually understand, instead of trying to lecture people like me about industries you've only ever observed from the outside. You want to talk about evolution? How about we talk about how every interview I do these days has to be filtered through this lens of political correctness that, frankly, makes me sick." The conversation was spiraling completely out of control, and Laverne found herself in the unprecedented position of having to actively challenge one of Hollywood's biggest stars on live television. "Daniel, I have to say I'm genuinely shocked by what I'm hearing. These attitudes you're expressing, they're not just unprofessional, they're deeply concerning." But rather than backing down or attempting to salvage the situation, Craig doubled down with an intensity that left everyone in the studio stunned. "Concerning? What's concerning is that I can't have a simple conversation about my work without being subjected to this kind of interrogation. You know what your problem is, Lauren. You and women like you think you can just waltz into any situation and demand respect without earning it. The misogyny was now so blatant that even the camera operators were exchanging shocked glances. Laverne, her voice now carrying a steely edge that her regular viewers had rarely heard, fired back with remarkable composure. Earning respect? Daniel, I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I've interviewed prime ministers, Nobel Prize winners, and yes, countless actors, including many of your peers, who somehow managed to conduct themselves with basic human decency. Craig's face flushed red, as he clearly wasn't used to being challenged so directly. Basic human decency? You're lecturing me about decency while you're sitting there trying to trap me into saying something you can use for your little viral moments. This is exactly what's wrong with modern journalism. It's all about the gotcha moment. All about making the man look bad, so you can feel superior. The gendered nature of his attacks was becoming more pronounced with every exchange, and Laverne wasn't about to let it slide. Making the man look bad? Daniel, you're doing that entirely on your own. I asked you a simple question about the film industry, and you've turned it into this bizarre attack on women in media. I have to ask, is this really how you view your female colleagues? What happened next will likely go down as one of the most explosive moments in recent television history. Craig stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. My female colleagues? Let me tell you something about my female colleagues. The ones who actually do the work, who don't sit around in studios playing gotcha journalism with people who've actually accomplished something. They understand that this business isn't about checking boxes or making everyone feel included. It's about results. Laverne remained seated, her professionalism intact, despite the increasingly hostile atmosphere. Daniel, I think you need to take a step back and listen to what you're actually saying. These attitudes you're expressing, they belong in a different century. Craig's laugh was bitter and mocking as he began pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. A different century? Maybe that different century knew something about respect and hierarchy that your generation has completely forgotten. Maybe that different century understood that not everyone's opinion carries the same weight. The studio was now in complete chaos, with producers frantically signaling from behind the cameras, while the live audience sat in stunned silence. Laverne, showing incredible strength under pressure, continued to challenge the increasingly unhinged actor. Hierarchy? Respect? Daniel, respect is earned through how you treat people, not through intimidation and condescension. And right now, you're showing viewers exactly who you really are. This observation seemed to push Craig over the edge completely. Who I really am? I'm someone who's worked their entire life to get where I am, who's taken risks and made sacrifices that people like you could never understand. And I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone whose biggest achievement is reading questions off cards. The personal attack was devastating in its cruelty, but Laverne's response was swift and cutting. Reading questions off cards? Daniel, I've built a career spanning radio, television, and journalism based on connecting with people and telling their stories. But clearly, you're not interested in having an actual conversation. You're interested in performing some kind of misogynistic power play. Craig's eyes flashed dangerously as he pointed an accusatory finger at the host. Misogynistic? There's that word again. You people throw that around like it means something. Just because someone doesn't bow down to your particular worldview doesn't make them misogynistic. It makes them honest. Laverne's voice remained steady despite the incredible pressure she was under. Honest? Daniel? Honesty would be acknowledging that your behavior right now is completely inappropriate. Honesty would be recognizing that treating women with basic respect isn't some political agenda, it's just being a decent human being. The confrontation reached its absolute peak when Craig slammed his hand down on the arm of his chair with enough force to make the microphones jump. Decent human being? You want to talk about decency? How decent is it to ambush someone on live television? How decent is it to twist every word someone says to fit your narrative? Laverne, now visibly frustrated but still maintaining her composure, delivered what would be her final attempt to salvage the interview. Daniel, nobody ambushed you. Nobody twisted your words. You've spent the last several minutes attacking women in media, questioning our capabilities, and suggesting we don't deserve the same respect as our male counterparts. These are your words, your attitudes, and frankly, they're inexcusable. But Craig was beyond reason now, his face red with anger, and his voice raised to a level that was genuinely alarming. Inexcusable? You know what's inexcusable? Having to sit here and pretend that every opinion is equally valid, that every voice deserves to be heard, regardless of experience or accomplishment. Some of us have actually earned our place at this table. The implication was crystal clear, and Laverne wasn't about to let it stand. Earned our place? Daniel, I notice you keep using phrases like some of us and talking about who deserves to be heard. Are you suggesting that women haven't earned their places in this industry? Craig's response was the final nail in the coffin of what had once been his public reputation. I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, not everyone who has a platform should be using it to tear down the people who built the very industry they're now trying to critique. I'm suggesting that experience matters more than agenda. Laverne's final words before Craig's explosive exit were delivered with a quiet dignity that made them all the more powerful. The only agenda I see here, Daniel, is your apparent belief that women don't belong in positions where we might ask difficult questions or challenge powerful men. And if that's really how you feel, then I think our viewers have learned everything they need to know about who you really are. For a moment, the studio was completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the distant sounds of London traffic outside. Craig stood motionless behind his chair, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled rage. Then, without warning, he ripped off his microphone with such force that it created a sharp feedback squeal through the studio speakers. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, Craig snarled, his voice now completely stripped of any pretense of civility. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, and I'm not going to be lectured by someone who thinks they can psychoanalyze me on live television. With that, Daniel Craig turned on his heel and stormed off the set, leaving Lauren Laverne sitting alone under the studio lights, with millions of viewers witnessing one of the most shocking celebrity meltdowns in television history. The sound of the studio door slamming echoed through the space as cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of the aftermath of what will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most explosive confrontations ever broadcast live on television.